Welcome back to Jersey Matters. Does the name Bamberger's mean anything to you? If you're of a certain age, you will remember Bamberger's as the best known department store in New Jersey. But Bamberger's is much more than that. The Bamberger history is an important part of New Jersey's history and of world history. To explain, here is Linda Forgosh, author of the book Louis Bamberger, department store innovator and philanthropist. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Most people will know Bamberger's, I guess, as the building in Newark. That was the flagship store, right?
Correct.
But there was many more. 32?
There were, but they would have been branches of Bamberger's Newark store. He had built that very small department store, which was 2 floors, starting in 1892, but by 1929, it was then considered to be the 4th largest department store in America. And then when he lost his partner, Felix Fold, he thought, well, I'm 74 years old. I think maybe it's time for me to retire. In 10 days, he sold his department store, lock, stock, and barrel, to the Strauss family, who were the owners of Macy's.
Right, and that's what's kind of amazing. Macy's was in New York, Marshall Field's was in Chicago, Hudson was in Detroit. You had these big cities that had department stores, but Newark wasn't a big city, which makes it more amazing what he did.
I thought so. And when you walked into Bamberger's, you were guaranteed of 100% pluperfect customer service. You were Bamberger's guest. And he just didn't leave it only to his employees to set the tone. You would see him in the aisles on a regular basis.
And yet you said you had a hard time finding pictures of him, and yet he didn't want publicity for himself.
No, he didn't. Bamberger's relationships with the community were one-on-one.
And I want to talk about the relationships with the community and the effect that he had. We started the segment by talking about New Jersey history and world history. There are iconic buildings, there's iconic hospitals that Bamberger was personally responsible for, right?
Yes.
Such as?
Well, there would be no Beth Israel Hospital, based on my research. And when Bamberger took a look at the city, Newark, which was his main love, and which, by the way, I should put an aside in, Bamberger had a great reputation in the city of Newark with the people who lived there, those with influence, those without influence, and nevertheless, he called it his beloved city, but he himself was born and raised in Baltimore.
Wow, that's interesting.
And did not show up in the city of Newark until he was 37 years old in 1892.
What are some other places that we may know of? That
well, I would say the most prestigious, largest the museum in this state of New Jersey is the Newark Museum. Bamberger was the sole donor. He donated the entire building. He hired the architect, he had the builders, and he put it all in place. And when that opened, it was really an event. It had collections the likes of which you could not imagine. If you were thinking about American artists that were then very new to the scene, they were there. Maybe 3,000 people turned out just to give this Newark Museum its grand entrance into the world. The only person who wasn't there was Louis Bamberger.
Because he was avoiding the press, is that the idea?
Yes, he sent a telegram from Florida. He apologized profusely, but he wasn't going to be there.
To find out about the other buildings and institutes that Louis Bamberger had a part in, they're going to have to read the book for that. But I wanted to get to one thing before we wrapped up, because I talked about world history, and Louis Bamberger did have a place in world history because he was a big part of Albert Einstein's success.
Yes, he was. He brought Einstein to Princeton in 1930, where he became the Institute's head mathematician. By then, he was world famous, having won the Nobel Prize for his theory of relativity. But what the nicer part of the story is how a man, as I describe him, who sold suits and ties, gave a man quite as brilliant, clearly the greatest scientist of the 20th century and probably going forward, a job not selling suits and ties, but working as head mathematician for what became and is now in existence the Institute for Advanced Study, located in Princeton on Einstein Way.
Louis Bamberger, department store innovator and philanthropist. The author is Linda Forgosh. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
That wraps up Jersey Matters for this week. Stick around now for another thing.